I believe it was Golda Meir who first said, "Old age is like a plane flying through a storm. Once you are aboard, there is nothing you can do about it. No matter who you are, what you do, how healthily you live, you will age, you will get old, you will die." Time is a particularly cruel figure in professional wrestling, where bodies break down from the endless hard bumps and grind of the traveling performer lifestyle. Many greats stick around too long, leaving room for fans to rethink their once glowing assessments of them. Spotting flaws in their later years, they soon apply to their primes as well. Bill Goldberg, a beloved, charismatic powerhouse babyface in WCW, is now largely laughed at as a talentless old coot who can barely do 2 moves or survive a couple of minutes in the ring. The nostalgic fondness many had for his prime years has now been scuppered as well, with many noting his recklessness in the ring, Bret Hart, and general lack of technique and psychology in general. Ric Flair, often in the argument for greatest of all time, stuck around way too long, coming to be remembered poorly among modern generations as a comical geriatric who refused to pack it in, rather than the dynamic showman who carried the NWA and Jim Crockett promotions throughout the 80s. People have noted his repetitive match structures, over-reliance on certain spots and jokes and promos, and his unfortunate real-life reputation as a walking disaster fueled by booze and these days seemingly mushroom-powered energy drinks. Chris Jericho was once universally liked among wrestling fans. Casuals appreciated his character work and humor. Hardcore fans appreciated his work rate. Everyone appreciated his general entertainment value. Now, though, he is a bloated diva accused of dragging down those who work with him, with some even questioning just how good his prime work even was. It was very good, by the way, but this is the price one pays when they stick around past hitting a certain wall in life. These are just a few of the many key examples of this sad, inevitable trend. Right now, beyond Chris Jericho, AEW have themselves another example of it, growing more tiresome by the week. But first, New Year's Revolution 2006. Long-time mid-carder and multi-time failed main event push Edge finally reached his full potential, cashing in on John Cena to win the WWE Championship. Almost 8 long years after debuting, with countless brutal TLC matches, a funny tag team with his pal Christian, neck fusion surgery, and a slew of stop-start pushes and character changes, and finally, the rated R superstar was on top. As a weasel, let's remember that. A cowardly character, a slimeball heel who stole the gold from an injured, exhausted John Cena. Great angle. Good, scummy supervillain stuff, even though fans in the building that night largely cheered because finally someone had taken the belt away from Big Match John. John Cena hate was very, very hip at the time. In the lead-up to his title win, WWE had worked hard to make Edge their most vile heel this side of Triple H. Edge was a man who had cucked Kane and Matt Hardy the year before, with Matt Hardy enduring this in reality as well as kayfabe, no less. A man who'd bashed Chris Benoit's brains in with a brick, which, kind of scary to watch with the benefit of hindsight, but anyway, and had reduced Ric Flair to a bloody pulp, sort of like every second guy who worked with Flair in the mid-noughties. Edge had quickly become the ultimate scumbag in WWE, a shameless degenerate, and a true master of being a cheap heat merchant. Adam Copeland, the actual guy, really found his voice and style in the role, and started filling the big star slot Vince McMahon had long envisioned for him. The years that followed maintained Edge as one of the WWE's most dependable dickheads, feuding with beloved babyfaces like Jeff Hardy, Batista, and The Undertaker, putting people off their dinner with sickening makeout sessions with Vicky Guerrero, and cheating and lying his way through a ton of angles and hard-hitting matches. Edge, overall, all round, was one of WWE's most dependable and dynamic acts throughout the late noughties. He had a pretty evil face, to be honest, very sinister facial expressions with those prominent, dare we say, buggy eyes.
Don't look at me like that with those bug eyes, sir.
And there was his rockstar hair, his lunatic overreactions when people kicked out of moves he hit. The guy really captured being unhinged and desperate. It's a fine art to make yourself entirely unlikable, and heel Edge did as good a job as anyone in his day. The problem with Edge was, as effective as he was in the bad guy role, he was never really a draw on his own. Some of his opponents were big draws, and his feuds with them were very successful. But Edge, as a leading man, time and again, house shows and the like simply did not reach ideal sales levels with him front and center. Edge was the guy who works with the guy. An important role, sure, but not the true leading man of the show either. And in 2010, with WWE seriously lacking in effective, heroic characters being around full-time or near enough beyond John Cena, Edge got to enjoy not one, but 2 cracks at babyface glory. After such a long stretch as WWE's most vile, reprehensible character, Edge simply was not cut out to be a proper babyface. He came off as way too aggressive and arrogant on the mic to be likable, and he was sorely lacking in the wit and charm of better babyfaces of his generation. By mid-2010, Edge was talking about retirement, planning to potentially bow out at WrestleMania 28 in 2012. His body was beat to hell from years of hard-bumping gimmick matches and showdowns. And his character work, once his main ticket to the top, was stale and lacking. And even his appearance was far from the rockstar pretty boy sleazeball style he'd pulled off at his peak. It was clear he was wrestling through severe pain and a litany of injuries both severe and minor. Essentially, all good things must come to an end, and the man himself, having spent his entire adult life in the business, had the self-awareness to pick up on that unfortunate fact. Unfortunately, his planned retirement feud with Christian never came to fruition, as 2011 revealed, to the surprise of almost no one, that there are long-term consequences for broken necks and major fusion surgery. Mr. Rated R had spinal stenosis, and any bump could see him become Christopher Reeve, or just outright dead. He bowed out, wisely, as World Heavyweight Champion no less, and moved on to a life of B-grade acting roles. Great work if you can get it, I'm not hating. Despite the disappointing closing stretch and premature ending, Edge's main event run was a relative success. For years, fans fondly remembered his knack for absurdly dangerous ladder matches, his mastery of playing an out-and-out jerk, and the epic nature of his rivalries with top babyfaces like John Cena and The Undertaker. Sure, he was never quite the draw WWE had wanted, but he was far from a flop either, and WWE struggled to find a heel of that generally detestable, heat-seeking quality for years. So Rated R superstar Edge, in all of his liter-humping glory, was all the rage when yours truly was a kid. This is how old I am now, you see. It was year 7, first year of secondary school as Brits call it, and a lot of us loved WWE. Plenty of kids were very high on John Cena, because of course they were. His whole gimmick and style was tailored to younger viewers. But for myself and several others, strangled by the claustrophobic hell of the repressive, abusive creepfest of an all-boys Catholic school, a hellhole where youngsters are stripped of any individuality or ambition beyond the workforce they might have had. Well, you see, to people like that, a character like Edge seemed really cool. A violent, cocky rebel, with the flame-haired Jezebel girlfriend, as Jim Ross would say, doing whatever the hell he wanted, any old time. For certain impressionable 12-year-olds, that was the dream, to get up, cause trouble, and just give the whole world the finger. So let's fast forward to 2020, to the last days of normalcy before a germ changed the very vibe of this world seemingly forever. Royal Rumble 2020 One of the absolute best Rumble matches ever put together, in this narrator's humble opinion. Brock Lesnar, as champion, walks in and reminds everyone why he is the Beast. You get that great moment where Keith Lee storms in and everyone thought he'd be the next babyface sensation for WWE. You see Lesnar dancing to MVP's theme, and you see Drew McIntyre send Lesnar packing halfway through the bout to an absolute mega pop. Fast forward a bit, and Edge's music, an actual song, none of this Def Rebel audio feces, an actual rock track from Alter Bridge hits. Were stem cells in Colombia part of this miracle return? Hey, let's not dwell on it. Edge is back, that's what matters. This was all very exciting on the night, but the weeks and months that followed came to prove just how glaring Edge's flaws from his prime really were. Babyface Edge has himself a feud with Randy Orton. The Viper does some of his best heel work of his career on the mic in the lead up to WrestleMania. Edge, meanwhile, pulls a lot of angry faces and does a lot of yelling. Look, in storyline, he has every reason to be fuming. Randy Orton tried to break his neck, and then he hit his wife with an RKO. Problem was, Edge really just came across as a victim, and he's over-the-top acting, far from the kind of comical, scummy stuff he really nailed as a heel. Just felt melodramatic and kinda lame, especially in the face of Randy Orton doing surprisingly good psychopath material. Their last man standing match at that year's WrestleMania was badly hurt by the empty arena that was there for reasons. And the match itself was a self-indulgent mess of minor-looking bumps, endless loud ref counts every minute. Or maybe it was 1, 2, 3, 4. The match is so awful I've tried to remove it from my memory. And a corny attempt at a dramatic finish when Edge seemingly comforts a knocked out, head beaten in with a steel chair Randy Orton. He's got his hand on Orton's arm. This man tried to cripple you and beat up your wife. This was not a great start to a surprise return everyone had been very happy to see. And the problem of Edge trying and largely arguably failing in the noble babyface role is already rearing its ugly head. Once again, next up, there is the greatest match of all time. And I don't mean Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. I don't mean Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat or Kenta Kobashi versus Mitsuharu Misawa. Not Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker. No. Randy Orton versus Edge. Off the back of a bad match. This was a hell of a tagline to put on this rematch, I'll tell you. With a whole lot of video editing and special effects, the two put together a very long-winded, but in fairness often very entertaining, often ridiculous, cinematic match with Randy Orton going over. Big improvement on the WrestleMania match for sure. Here's the problem though. Remember how Edge was a bit injury-prone in his prime? Right, well, that kind of issue doesn't just go away. And his triceps went into business for itself here. He had a CM Punk moment, if you will, and it tore completely. Gone. And he'd only just come back. Despite the rather blah nature of his return thus far, WWE were not quite ready to give up on him yet. And in 2021, we get Edge winning the Royal Rumble with some help from his old pal Christian along the way. Alright, the comeback hero's done another comeback within the first year of his original comeback. There was room for a feel-good story here, of a redeemed Edge, now a wise veteran, doing things the right way and winning a world title as a noble babyface, having learned from his past transgressions. The big problem with that was a lot of people just didn't seem to care all that much. Edge's tour of all three shows to decide which world champion he wanted to face failed to light the world, or more importantly the ratings, on fire. On NXT in particular, he came across as a self-indulgent, out-of-touch old-timer, trying to seem cool and hip with the young guys, even though most of those young guys were either well into their 30s or Pete Dunne. In the meantime, two cool heels were taking off. Roman Reigns, once the face of smug hatred as Vince McMahon's pet project, was now the only thing in WWE really garnering any hype as a heel Universal Champion. Raw, meanwhile, saw Bobby Lashley finally realize his potential as a heel with MVP in his corner, getting his hands on the WWE Championship and convincingly playing a take-no-prisoners powerhouse villain. Neither champ was someone anyone was all that desperate to see lose just yet. Both guys were doing good work, and with live crowds on the way back, WWE were understandably hesitant to mess with anything that had a good shot at moving tickets. So Edge, unfortunately, was in the lurch. Ultimately, with Reigns considered the bigger, more important deal, Edge was moved over to challenging him in order to give the tribal chief a big name at WrestleMania. Once again, Edge, frequently on the mic, came off as a bit disingenuous, a bit arrogant, and generally kind of unpleasant. Reigns, meanwhile, despite playing the actually nasty, horrible character of the two on paper, seemed cool and confident and collected. The psychology between the pair was getting messy, and WWE quickly broke the babyface glass in case of emergency, and got Daniel Bryan to take a break from jobbing to mid-carders to come and play a main event underdog babyface once again. Edge, now stripped of the lone hero role, started acting more heelishly week to week, understandably miffed that his Mania main event was now a triple threat. And funnily enough, he actually became more likable and more engaging as he gave in a bit to his dark side. The kind of darker persona he was actually good at playing coming back into view, and this time with a good reason and understandable, sympathetic explanation for why he was getting nasty. Regardless, Roman Reigns was what mattered most to the WWE, as the man who'd managed to turn the sinking ship around, a little bit at least, in the Thunderdome era. His victory was never really in question, and neither Edge nor Daniel Bryan were there for feel-good comeback stories. They were there to ensure Reigns came out of Mania as the promotion's undisputed top heel. The next few years of Edge in the WWE washed away whatever nostalgic appeal he had when he first came back. As a part-timer, he simply did not have the big-name appeal or drawing value of other aging part-timers such as Brock Lesnar, or The Rock, or even his old rival, The Undertaker. He returned to playing a face after that year's WrestleMania, getting largely shown up by younger talents such as Seth Rollins in feuds that, while decent, continued to showcase a very middling approach to playing a good guy. Edge dusted off the brood stuff, pretending to be a 20-something goth vampire in his 40s, claiming it was a key time in his career when, in reality, for the most part, arguably, it was time spent as a jobber. With him and Christian only really getting over with fans fully when they branched out on their own back then, found their sense of humor and their own voices as an amusing, kind of insufferable heel tag team. Finally, in 2022, Edge takes the hint, and he turns heel. He's not the rated R superstar heel character again, though, which is fine. He's nearly 50 and got a wife and kids. So that would be a rather weird gimmick to run with at this point in his career. Instead, he is now Satanic Edge. Ooh. Funnily enough, he was one of the many jobbers who filled the ranks in the Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness faction back in the day, and now it became clear he wanted his very own take on that kind of group. The problem was Edge was not a near 7-foot satanic biker tough guy from the desert who was basically allergic to jobbing most of the time. Instead, much of his career revolved around being a cheating, cowardly scumbag who'd now transitioned into a frustrated veteran who could no longer win the big one. This was a weird and kind of out-of-nowhere change of pace for a feud with AJ Styles, who, much like Edge, was past his best days by this point. Edge gets a big throne and fire entrance at WrestleMania, and Michael Cole tries to make sense of the whole thing by claiming this is Edge's dark side. He's Mr. Hyde, if you will. Now, at the time, Edge was doing some auditions. He's still a TV actor now, even as a wrestler, and he was up for the role of a villain in Disney's Percy Jackson show, which he did wind up getting. One can't help but wonder if these very acting-heavy promos he was rocking at the time were really intended as quick showcases for the TV execs out there, so they could see how effective he is as a supernatural, over-the-top bad guy. Most of his promos at the time were done backstage, in studio settings, where Edge could really act at the camera and try and be wrestling's Laurence Olivier or Daniel Day-Lewis or something. Overall, though, the very over-the-top villainy and theatrics were giving fans a weird, unexpected gimmick barely even meant for them. Poor AJ Styles seemed as confused as audiences watching Edge cut Stephen King reject monologues from a dark room, rambling incoherently about toughness in wrestling or something. I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. WrestleMania arrives, and this match, that would have genuinely been excellent in the late noughties, is a plodding, awkward affair between two men with little chemistry, both of whom are struggling with the cruel realities of time. The one thing no athlete or performer will ever outrun. Edge wins. He needs to win. This is a new character. What kind of start would it be to lose as a new heel character? You see, this isn't Triple H booking the New Day this year. This is Vince McMahon letting a Hall of Famer indulge himself a little. Next month, rematch. Edge does not return the favour. Styles does the job again because Styles, and it really pains me to say this, has ultimately spent most of his WWE run as a mid to at best upper mid-card guy. Seemingly destined to never hold world title gold again after his 2017 to 2018 second run with the title proved pretty awful on the ticket sales front. In this time, Edge picked up Damian Priest as a henchman at WrestleMania, saving him from that split personality gimmick everyone now pretends never happened, and Rhea Ripley, saving her from life as an awkward mid-carder who seemed uncomfortable on the mic and even just walking to the ring half the time, playing second fiddle to comedy babyfaces in the tag team division, even though she's meant to be a tough goth powerhouse. The Judgment Day. This was pure, unfiltered, Undertaker knockoff material. One of many attempts at a non-Undertaker gothfest with hokey supernatural vibes no one really asked for, unless Undertaker himself was doing it. That being said, despite the rocky start, Edge, who was now sporting a new haircut, new style, and new approach to live TV promos, had successfully revitalized himself by accepting he is indeed a natural-born heel, and updating his villainous ways to suit his age and interests. This was the most exciting Edge had been since all the way back in 2009, since before that Achilles injury that year seemingly stripped the guy of his aura and confidence. And then Cody Rhodes goes and tears his pec, pushing way too hard on the bench press. Why does a Cody Rhodes injury affect Edge, you might ask? They weren't feuding. What's the problem here? What a stupid thing to say. The problem is Cody Rhodes had been penciled in to be Raw's top babyface when he returned in 2022. With him now out, options were limited. Seth Rollins, maybe he could have done it for a few months, but he'd been sabotaged the moment he hit a crippled Rhodes with a sledgehammer. No one's going to cheer for him after that for a while. He was also Seth Jubbins at the time, on his back, looking at the ceiling for countless men like he's Sonny in 1997 or something. Matt Riddle was funny, well-liked by fans, but silly and untested higher up on the card. And he was also an unprofessional disaster zone behind the scenes. Edge, meanwhile, was dependable. He had name value, and there was a quick way to have him turn face. Have the Judgment Day betray him. This marked the official end of Edge being interesting in the WWE. The rest of 2022 and 2023 saw him feud endlessly with new Judgment Day leader Finn Balor, a cruiserweight, who, while immensely talented, has never taken off to the high level on the main roster. With Vince McMahon, one of Edge's biggest supporters throughout his career by most accounts, now gone and out of the picture for unfortunate reasons, and with Triple H now in charge, it appeared the Rated R superstar was starting to feel the heat around the corner. Now personally, I'm not a huge fan of dirt sheets, and I'm not that desperate to hear about backstage politics or wrestlers' personal lives, right? But this next part is probably worth considering. By most accounts, Edge and Triple H never really got along that well back in the day, and it's worth noting there are very few angles between them, bar a funny mini-feud and a rather average match at Great American Bash 2008. Beyond that, there's the occasional TV match before Edge became a world champion, but overall, this was a feud that never really got capitalized on or developed. As two of WWE's top heels, sometimes he was a babyface Triple H, but let's be honest, we all preferred him as a heel. It's not implausible there might have been a feeling of competition between the two, as Edge was the new, hot, young heel, compared to Triple H at least. Perhaps, if indeed there was some tension between the two for whatever silly, petty, competitive reason two men in a highly competitive, cutthroat entertainment medium might have, Edge opted out, rather than be booked by someone who maybe wouldn't humour his attempts at being a part-time attraction, despite minimal drawing power. And the other interesting part of that is Edge himself has said he was happy to work more dates. So it appears he was already getting buxed in by not really turning up all that much. Edge's WWE return ultimately can be argued to be a flop. He'd come back to major fanfare, but had gotten hurt again almost immediately, had failed to pull a leading star level of crowd interest again, and hadn't even got to run his experimental new heel stuff past 2 or so months. Many younger fans, who might have missed his heyday, likely saw him as corny and over the top, with ridiculous facial expressions and mannerisms, and a perpetually changing character that never really had much depth or context. For fans who did see Edge in his prime, like myself, it was a dreary, disappointing couple of years of self-indulgent storytelling from a performer not really cut out to be the lead hero babyface he clearly wanted to be. Some good stuff in that time. It's not like it's all awful. I'm not going to pretend it was unwatchable tush, but it was disappointing, considering all the hype he'd had initially. Now, and this is where things really drop off a cliff, many of Edge's flaws were now more fully realized in the public consciousness, and he was out the door, hightailing it to the competition, a place struggling to maintain fan interest despite a monumental budget and, once upon a time just a few years prior, a budding sense of fan hype. That place is, of course, AEW. In 2019, so many had turned to AEW as it got ready to launch, in the hopes of WWE finally having a rival that could teach it a lesson for the first time since prime WCW. Instead, what they got was a mixed bag, a very entertaining, but very chaotic, violent show full of goofy indie talents, bloodbath hardcore matches, random pull-apart brawls, and Cody Rhodes seeming to think he's the Messiah or something. It was its own baby. A fresh product, despite the many former WWE talents there. On the other hand, though, it was not particularly mainstream friendly, and many of its style choices and emphasis on smaller indie talents got it some flack and some hate from a lot of fans out there. By the time Edge arrives there, now stripped of the ring name he'd been known by since 1998, it was a shell of its old self. Reeling from the trauma of CM Punk's bitter real-life dispute with several of the promotion's top midgets and Hangman Page, who, to be fair to him, grew to a normal size in life. The Gripe Bomb, the Wembley scuffle with Jack Perry, the Ariel Helwani interview. In being driven mad by dirt sheets and shady backstage politics in AEW, CM Punk had done far more damage to the promotion's reputation than any hater or critic ever could. And the results spoke for themselves. CM Punk returns to WWE to a hero's welcome and a large amount of general public support for his side of the beef with AEW. Whether that's fair or not is a different question, of course. AEW, meanwhile, has been on a grim, downwards, frustrating spiral ever since, losing most of its hype and general buzz. Could Edge be what turned that sinking ship around? Well, I mean, obviously not. Think of the title of this video. Obviously the answer's no. And on top of that, I just tripped over that by pointing out how they've been on a decline ever since, and Edge has been there for a while now, so yeah. The good news about him joining AEW, though, was that his dream retirement feud could finally happen. Christian Cage had found new life in AEW as one of their most colourful and ridiculous heels. A diabolical creep who loved making things personal and presenting himself as a bizarre fatherly figure to easily manipulated undercarders. This was one of AEW's silliest gimmicks, and I mean that in the best possible way. It was very entertaining. Still is. His promos dripped with cheap heat, and fans to this day largely have fun booing him every time he picks up a mic. Adam Copeland versus Christian Cage. Alright, let's see how this goes. Edge debuts and immediately puts the beat down on some of Christian's cronies. Okay, feud's already begun, apparently. Then, on Dynamite, he reveals he actually wants to be Christian's friend again. Not his brother again. Everyone pretends they weren't presented as brothers during the Attitude Era. But he's friend. That's what they are now. They're friends. And then he goes and he does the reprehensible. He breaks kayfabe. He mentions to Christian Cage that his daughter wanted to see him work with Uncle Jay again. This would be like in Avengers Endgame, when geriatric Steve Rogers hands the shield to the Falcon. If he'd said, "You know, Kevin told me he wants to see Anthony Mackie rock a fourth Captain America movie. Congrats, Sam." What? Stay in character. It's nice these guys are pals in real life. No one's hating on friendship. But maintain some kayfabe. At least just call him Uncle Christian or Uncle Chris or something. Like, come on. He's beaten up Cage's stooges by this point. He's embarrassed his old pal. and then he wants to be his friend. I think Christian spoke for us all, who've had a big league idiot friend, so-called friend, always trying to show you up when he said,
Go f*** yourself.
This dramatic feud of lifelong friends turned bitter rivals could have been simple and effective. It could have been a personal dispute as a redeemed Edge falls foul of his old friend's descent into evil. Instead, half the angle revolved around some twink straight out of high school, probably hasn't gotten to third base in his life yet, named Nick Wayne, and his mum, who Christian is presumably banging, I don't know. Can you prove he's not? It was not boring. It was entertaining. But it was silly, too silly, and as per usual, Edge's attempts at stoicism, at playing a good man pushed to violence, just don't really work. They just don't suit him. There are some guys out there who can play that type of thing well. For instance, even though he was never a Dynamite promo, no pun intended, Bret Hart played this kind of thing masterfully in his day as a noble sportsman, seemingly always on the cusp of a total breakdown when the likes of Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin started messing with him. And when he finally snapped in 1997, it made for some great storytelling in TV. Edge, though, does not have the everyman charm of the Hitman, and instead has a career of playing a cartoonish villain he's now seemingly trying to retcon a little bit. Christian Cage, meanwhile, fares a little better on the mic doing his usual shtick, but the feud's over-reliance on Nick Wayne, on Luchasaurus, or Killswitch as he's now known, and general shenanigans hampered it. And the fact that ultimately their matches together revolved around a mid-card title, named after a channel Dynamite wasn't even on anymore, meant these guys, these legends, these beloved acclaimed stars of their generation, looked like mid-carders. It was like when old Ric Flair won the Intercontinental Championship, and Triple H, in storyline, so disgusted by seeing his hero become a mid-carder, tried and failed to put him down. Sort of like what alcohol has frequently tried and failed to do in Flair's life as well, I guess. Hockey jerseys, crowd brawls, hot potatoing the TV title. This feud had a lot of big stuff, but none of it quite landed, and a feud that had been highly anticipated for well over a decade came and went, barely making an impact on AEW's generally sagging rating. And along the way, Edge went and took a hot, steaming dump on his own aura when it became clear he couldn't handle being made fun of on social media or worse still, on TV. Wrestling as an industry has treated trolling as an art form long before the word even came into play. And while no one enjoys being dissed by faceless clowns on social media or on YouTube, guys, seriously, I have a face made for radio, alright? Damn it. Who actually wants to see me? Or anyone, unless they look like Sydney Sweeney or something, just talking into a camera ad nauseum. Anyways, no one enjoys it, that's my point. But the fact is, Edge and friends make 7 figures a year. And faceless loser fans, I'm not one of them, guys, seriously. They do not. You'd think one with such success would fail to even notice low-level criticism 99% of the time, and yet here Edge was, seemingly giving an old man lecture on good manners in someone's DMs. And then, when CM Punk spoke out on the circumstances leading to his leaving AEW the second time, Edge broke kayfabe on Dynamite to give a bootlicking promo about how much fun working in AEW is.
Everybody having fun?
It's great to enjoy where you work. And if he'd said this in a shoot interview out of character, cool, no problem. But this was on TV, seemingly in kayfabe, when he'd just come out of a blood feud with Christian Cage. He was not having fun. This outburst made no sense in storyline and came across as a cope, no pun intended, on the pressure the promotion was under from some bad PR from a jaded former employee. It got even worse when this fragile ego, this delicate sensibility, reared its head completely on live TV. Copeland is in the ring with Bryan Danielson and Ricky Starks. Starks is a heel at the time and he is trying to heel it up, during which time he notes Edge has buggy eyes. His words, not mine.
Don't look at me like that with those bug eyes, sir.
And well, this nothing throwaway comment, well, Adam Copeland got a bit upset.
It's your stupid silk slacks, dumbass. I hope that you're a midget version of that, but shut your mouth and talk to him instead of me, kid.
Now, to be clear, obviously, a star of his caliber should clap back when mocked. But the look on his face suggested, rather than playful banter, that hurt feelings were at play. He rinses Starks' fashion and considers him the vanilla midget version of The Ruck, as if Starks is even on that level compared to one of the absolute greatest to ever do it. Rather than cool and collected and funny, Edge stumbles through his words, clearly miffed, unscripted, but worse still, uncomfortable. All over a nothing comment that, well, I mean, it is kinda true, let's be honest. Some people just have big eyes, it's not a huge deal. Much like his return to WWE, Edge went on to lose a large amount of time to injury once again. Feuding with Malakai Black, Edge goes for a big splash off the top of the cage. Now, look, I'm no wrestler, obviously, but I can tell you when a wrestler goes for a jump like this, the idea is to essentially use the opponent, and especially the table they're lying on, to cushion the landing. You literally jump into a splash position and let the impact spread evenly, with the man below on the stunt table he's waiting on serving as a way to break the fall and lessen the horrendous damage a big jump of that height would otherwise do. Now obviously a veteran like Edge would know this. The problem is his hand catches on some barbed wire when he goes for the jump. It throws him off seemingly, and he winds up just hopping down from the top of the cage, barely touching Malakai Black, and instead landing most of his heavyweight frame directly on his legs, breaking one of them on impact. More time on the shelf. Another horrendous, career-threatening injury from a reckless gimmick match. A match bolstered by a feud where Copeland teased stealing Malakai Black's House of Black faction away from him. Now, funnily enough, Brody King once called Edge's Judgment Day the rip-off of House of Black, and now Edge is here teasing taking it over. The lack of originality, the repetitiveness of the angles compared to his WWE comeback run. It's all on full display here. Now, earlier this year, Adam Copeland made his comeback after 7 months away recovering from that pesky fractured tibia. If AEW seemed to be in decline in the middle of last year, sadly it is on a whole new level now, with Jon Moxley and the Dick Riders running the promotion into the ground, alienating even the most relentless, most dedicated supporters of the brand. Adam Copeland returns, and fans are happy to see him, obviously. But then he reveals his name change. Obviously, due to WWE owning the Edge name, he was just Adam Copeland in AEW, which is fine. Perfectly normal, respectable name. Now, though, in a bid to recapture the magic of a 4-letter word name, Copeland ditched his first name and cut his surname in half, and we're left with Cope. It boggles the mind. Imagine that. You're in the back, guys, I've got the perfect new name for myself. Oh yeah, what's that, Adam? Cope. Cope is a word thrown around a lot these days, normally as a negative, a sign of someone deluding themselves over their limitations or issues, to, cope with them. And we have this guy trying to ruck it as some cool, catchy new thing. It wouldn't be cool or catchy no matter who was rucking it, to be fair. He's still a babyface, wearing everything from farmer flannel to biker gear and bids to look like some grizzled tough guy. And he's gunning for the AEW World title. This doesn't seem to be drawing, to be honest with you. And what many fans have come to realize is that Edge, Cope, whatever, while usually over and well regarded, is rarely ever a draw, as we were discussing earlier. It's been a problem throughout his comeback run. That can be found cropping up in his prime as well, and more people are taking notice. Essentially, these recent years of work have come to highlight flaws such as his drawing issues, his ill-fitting approach to babyface work, his reliance on dangerous gimmick matches that are often too dangerous for his body at this point, and on top of that, his incredibly unlucky run of being severely injury-prone over the years. Now, to be clear, Edge was an awesome wrestler in his day, great heel, good character work, and very talented at putting together violent, well-paced blockbuster matches. But like the other guys mentioned at the start of this seemingly never-ending video, his later years have come to highlight and exaggerate flaws that will now taint and stain his legacy as a talent overall. The real question, though, is, does that matter? The answer is very simple. No! No, it does not matter. Because he's paid a fortune to do this and have fun. Fun, his favourite word in the world, apparently. While fans potter around with regular jobs, making videos he and any other successful star would never waste time watching.